Hello, everybody. Good morning and welcome to Live at the Waterhole, where first up we're in the wonderful Madikwe Executive, the north province of South Africa, at the Jamala Waterhole in particular. My name is Ralph Kirsten, and welcome aboard. I wonder what is going to be going down in the bush today. Well, you'll have to sit back, relax, and see what animals come down for a drink. And as per usual, please don't forget that this is a live and interactive experience. So we would love for you to jump on board with us and send us through your questions and your comments. You can do that by going on the WildEarth website and registering. You can also join the conversation on X, formerly known as Twitter, and you can use the hashtag WildEarth. Also on the YouTube live chat. What is it that you'd like to see, or what would you like to chat about? We'd love to hear from you. First up, though, we've got at least one elephant here. Looks like a nice balmy day here, just on the border of Botswana in the greater Kalahari region. So it generally is pretty hot, but it's nice to see that in the last few days and weeks it's been turning lovely and green. But we do hope that there'll be lots more rain to come. Yesterday was a little bit of a quiet day. However, as per usual, we did have quite a few elephants here at Jamala. There was the general range of game at Okukuyu. And of course, later on, we'll also cross to the Africam waterholes. So, what is laying in store for us? That is the question. So it's just a lone young bull here, and we often see that, the youngsters coming through, but also a bit of a groupings of them. There was quite a few of them here yesterday, as well as breeding herds. So there was a nice mix. It must be said that the hotter it is, the better it is for us at the waterholes, us being stationary just from the remote cameras, because the colder it is, the more rainy it is, the less chance we've had, or will have, of animals coming down to drink, because they don't really get as cold, or as hot, should I say. It is pretty cold then, so they're not really then looking to come and cool off. So the hotter the better, as I've mentioned, and it just goes to show here at Jamala, this part of the country gets really hot this time of year. So lots of elephant activity that we can expect. And speaking of the heat that I'm imagining there will be here in Madikwe, let's go and have a look what the weather's going to be like across all the different locations. So a bit of a mixed bag. There is some clouds around at the different locations. There's also a bit of rain, most notably in Kenya at the Udonyo Waterhole. As we can hear here, there's a little bit of wind as well. But I think that's not going to detract from the heat in this particular spot. And we have noticed that the elephants very often do go and perform geophagia in this particular zone. And they've been doing it through the winter when the resources were very low and probably very substandard feed. So they're getting their supplements of feeding on the mineral salts in this spot. So the fence that you see there, that's obviously just surrounding the Jamala Lodge and just keeping the big and hairy animals out of there. So some lodges do leave it unfenced, but you do get problems sometimes from elephants, especially coming in and being a bit naughty, breaking pipes, pulling down buildings or structures, etc. And it does make it then a little bit unsafe for families in particular. So sometimes they just fence it up and just to keep the animals on the outside. A couple of real youngsters there, but none within a year of age. I would say they're all about 2 plus, as I can see for now. Sounds like a starling calling there, maybe a Cape Glossy starling. And those youngsters in this elephant group will be mimicking the adults and copying them. So they'll also keep this in their memory of where to come and get these mineral salts. Whether the bulls leave and go off on their solitary ace, they'll return to the spot as well, having been taught by their mothers and the herd in general that this is what you do when you're not feeling that great or you're not getting enough quality feed. Come get your mineral salts. Tina, thanks for your comment and ahoy straight back at you. Boom shakalaka. Welcome aboard. So you might wonder why it's so clear around the lodge sort of area here as well. They will do that mainly for fire danger, just to give themselves a fire break that they would be able to fight the fire from. So generally around lodges, they might decide to do this, especially in these kind of semi-arid to arid parts where there can be a very high fire danger. So I'm imagining that's probably why they've done this. It might also form part of an airstrip where they could bring in private chartered flights. And speaking of these remote airstrips, oh, sometimes the camera doesn't always listen to its instructions. So it just went off on its own little tangent there. But these little airstrips, it's very often that the rangers need to go out and try and shoo the animals off the airstrip when the scheduled flights are coming in. And I've had to do that in the past as well. You've got to go and try and shift elephants or giraffe or general game or whatever it might be off the airstrip as the pilot's trying to land. I've actually had a couple of times where the airplane has actually had to circle around a few times with especially elephants on the airstrip itself. And then sometimes what they will do is they sort of fly quite low, just over the airstrip, just to try and shoo them off as well. But sometimes they're pretty stubborn, and it can take a little bit of doing to shift them off.
Step into a world of discovery as you join Eco Training's renowned courses in the heart of Kenya's Masai Mara. These courses are the perfect way to gain a deep understanding of the African bush, even if you have limited time. Don't miss out on this incredible opportunity to experience the wild in a meaningful and life-changing way. Enroll today and embark on a transformative journey with Eco Training in Kenya's Masai Mara, the leading force in conservation education.
So it's quite interesting. We saw them there go for their supplements and eating some of the mineral salts, the dirt, also called geophagia. Phagia, the eating of or feeding on, and geo being earth or ground. And so that's the sort of breakup of that term that we use. And then immediately afterwards, going to wash it down with a nice drink. You might find that after that, if they're not disturbed by other elephants arriving or anything else, they might have a nice little bath and a spray. And then who knows, they might even do a bit of dust bathing after that. So we always get the question around matriarchs and if you can identify which individual within the group is the matriarch. It's not necessarily always the oldest or the biggest or whatever it is. I would say mostly is down to the most experienced. So that generally is then sort of towards the oldest. But sometimes you can have a shift in the pyramid. Or the hierarchy, because you can have a younger female that maybe sort of pushes that matriarch out, who still then remains with the herd, but she would then be in charge. And that's generally when the older female, the more experienced one, is becoming a little bit weaker, can't lead the group as well as before. And then you'll have that slightly younger one, maybe sort of take her place. Sometimes they do then push that older one out. Um, it doesn't always happen. It's as you know, once they get to about 50 years of age, they get their last set of teeth. And once that is ground down, then they don't get any more. So then they start getting pretty weak because they're not able to digest their food properly. They're not able to chew it. So they're literally just breaking off branches and leaves and swallowing it. They do try and chew it, but it's just pressed between the gums with not really any grinding up of the plant matter. And you can often see that in their dung. And I've been on trail with and been tracking different herds of elephants. And when we find that, we often turn away from that particular individual because they can be highly aggressive. They're very often left behind by the herd, having been pushed out, and they're not feeling very well. So they're going to be pretty grumpy, and as a result, rather aggressive. And so we don't pursue those individuals because of that. But it can be quite a slow death, as they literally starve to death from there, uh, but very slowly. So you then start seeing their ribs showing, and obviously the signs are in the dung, and then they slowly move less and less. They don't drink as much, and they lose strength, and it's a slowly downward spiral. Chris Rogue, nice to have you on board with us once again. And yep, I agree. You can't go wrong with a sighting of a herd of ellies. As always, I'm hoping to see some predators. We have seen wild dogs here. A nice group of five young males. It seemed to be a breakaway group. Um, I've seen actually twice, but one was just before the show started, Murphy's Law. As the show went live, they disappeared. But we got to spend a few hours with that group of young males that were obviously a breakaway group, having left the pack maybe starting their own. They actually got chased by a herd of elephants who despised them, but they ran off, and then the elephants continued on, and the doggies came back, much to our delight. I also hear that there was a live kill on the show. I think that was at Rosie's Pan of wild dogs. They took out an impala. It's not always nice to watch, but fascinating from a bush perspective. Wild dogs, similar to hyenas, don't really dispatch their prey as quickly as we'd like, because they sort of, everybody just grabs the prey in a different spot and they literally just pull it apart. So it can be difficult to watch, but that's nature. It's brutal and very often unemotional. So Chris Rogue, once again, yeah, these Ellies do have a proper mud screen on them, most of them. We've seen them in the last few days. They've been here a lot. It's been very hot, and so there has been a lot of wallowing. Some even going and rolling around in the mud, but others are also standing on the bank and covering themselves. So it's been lovely. There's really a whole range of different ages here. You can see this tiny little one now struggling to get up the side of the bank. Slippy slips there. Is mommy going to help it up? I think definitely. There we go. Come on, little one. Up you get. That's it. So that one could be within a year. And then we've got 2 or 3-year-olds. There's about 5 or 6-year-olds as well. And then up into the teens, and then full adult females as well. And that's always nice to see in a breeding herd when you've got a whole range of ages, because it just shows that they're very healthy and the cycles have been very regular, natural, and there hasn't really been a break in the female's breeding cycle. So, Oliver, good question. Yes, elephants, the breeding herds, they huddle together closely like this, especially when they've got tiny little youngsters like this little one that was struggling to get up the bank. And the young females, they're assisting the mothers that have got the youngsters. So everybody working together for the greater good of the herd. And obviously staying together in a nice close-knit unit like this does help to protect, especially the youngsters. And that's what they're all about, is getting the youngsters through to the adult age. If they're bulls, obviously around the age of about 12 or 13 years of age, that's when they start becoming boisterous and they get pushed out. It doesn't look like there's any boisterousness going on here currently. So I don't know if there's any sort of bulls of that age. It's most likely just females, also of different ages, but all assisting for that upbringing of the young babies. It's not only for the safety and the better good of the herd, it's also so that they learn for themselves how to bring up their own babies once that cycle comes through. So they're learning as they grow.
Whether you're a retiree, a recent graduate, or a professional seeking a change, the 55-day Eco Training program is for you. With the coaching of experienced training guides You'll embark on an unforgettable adventure that will give you a deep understanding of wildlife, conservation, and African cultures. If you sign up locally or internationally using this promo code, you'll receive 2,000 Rand off.
There's our Deirdre's cuckoo calling in the background again. He's been here every day. So just a little bit of info from, in fact, it's SeaWorld. And I've often found quite a bit of interesting info from their website. And they say that elephants have good hearing, detecting sounds as low as 14 to 16 hertz. And the human low range is 20 hertz. So they can go quite a bit lower than that, and as high as 12,000 hertz, with humans having a range of up to 20,000. So we can hear a lot of high pitch sounds, but they can hear obviously much further in the low pitch sounds. And elephants frequently use infrasonic sounds, which are sounds emitted below the human hearing range, and mainly for long distance communication. Research has shown that elephants are capable of recognizing calls and voices of particular individuals from 1 to 1.5 kilometers away. And the ears of elephants are also used to funnel in sound waves from the environment, contributing to its very keen sense of hearing. In general, animals with large heads and wide set ears are better adapted for hearing lower frequency sounds because the larger skull encompasses longer ear canals, wider tympanic membranes, the membrane that separates the middle ear from the exterior, and larger middle ears. So, where you look at the actual ear flap of the elephant, right, if you go directly back from the eye, you can actually then see the ear opening. It's not behind that ear flap, it's in front of it. And there might be a little bit of indifference here as these looks like bulls make the approach. There's one here now very close and another one also coming through. So let's watch and see what happens. He's most likely going to want to barge his way in and go through for a drink, but he'll also probably be sort of touching and smelling and communicating with this group. But look at him. He's just going to push his way all the way through there. And you might see, oh, he's just got a bump on that little baby. You might see them move off now. They're very often so when the bulls come in these groups with little babies, they move off. They don't want to hang around with the risk of injury to the little ones. You see now he's turning around. I wonder if that's because of that approaching alternative bull. See, both putting their ears out, trying to make themselves look bigger, trying to intimidate each other. And let's see who's going to win this. So, Violet, yes, males and females do have tiffs. It's mainly when the bulls are in must and they're pushing themselves onto the females and they either have babies or they're not receptive to the bull, but they're pretty pushy at that time when they're in must. So you can have a lot of stress with the females, and sometimes the bulls try to mount them, and that's when they do then clash. But they prefer to try and get away from the bulls. And I've often seen where bulls that are in must are pursuing herds, and it's literally they're just running away from this bull the entire time. And it can last up to a week, and sometimes even more, where these bulls are just pursuing these breeding herds. And there's a lot of trumpeting, and you can hear that there's a lot of stress within the group. And the bulls seemingly relentless in chasing the groups and trying to mate with the females. But generally speaking, outside of must and when the bulls are pretty relaxed, there's not really much problems with the females. It's only with alternative bulls that they have tiffs with. They have lots of wrestling or argy bargy, lots of pushing each other around. It's all in good practice as well for when they really need to and fight for dominance and breeding rights. So, as with the young females learning about caring for the youngsters, the young bulls, it's important for them to practice wrestling and pushing and shoving a lot so that when they actually do want to fight for dominance, that they're well versed in it. So, Dana, elephants are generally the same color. There can be slight differences, from different geographical locations, but pretty much you can judge when they're all wet without mud on them, like when it rains. So, if you look at elephants that have just been rained on, and from different areas and locations, you'll notice that they're pretty much all the same shade of gray with slight differences. Um, but they obviously take on the color of the location that they're at and the soil that they use to dust bathe with. So, yeah, obviously a very big part of the Kalahari region, so it's a very red soil. Sometimes it's the gray of the clay that you get in these drainage lines as well. But mostly you'll see these elephants here being more red. And then if we look at the ones in Etosha, those are famed for being the white elephants, but they're not naturally white. It's they're naturally grey and a very similar color to these elephants, almost exactly the same. But because of the white soil that they use to dust bathe with, they take on a white appearance. But they also turn back grey when it rains, which is not very often. But when it does, they take on that same hue of grey. So that was pretty typical behavior from that breeding herd. As soon as the bulls arrived, and we chatted about it before they did, normally for the protection of that, especially that little youngster, move away from the bulls. You know, the bulls can be a little bit boisterous. They can also start fighting with each other, and little babies like that could get in the way and very easily get injured. So they mitigate the risk by just leaving the area. And it seems like they've hung around just waiting for these other youngsters to have finished their drink. And once they catch up, maybe they'll push off entirely. Or they might hang around in the shade there a little bit, just away from this waterhole. So Betty B, well, that is what we would like to achieve, is to immerse ourselves in nature, and for me, just to try and add to it by narrating what I'm seeing and answering any questions that we do get. So lovely start though with this herd of elephants, I must say. So, Wally, I'm glad that you enjoy the different investigations that I like to get into. But it's also nice. Sometimes I run out of ideas of what I would like to delve into. So, if anybody would like to understand anything deeper or they have something that they've always wanted to know, send it through because in that I often try and let you, the viewers, lead the discussion, and then I go down the rabbit hole of whatever direction we've taken. So if you have an idea, I'd love to hear it. Wow, and Chris Rogue saying that some of the forest elephants in Congo are green. Now, I wonder, I'm going to look into this, Chris Rogue, because I wonder if that is a natural color or if it's as a result of some external factor that they're throwing on themselves or is, changing their natural disposition. But I'll have a look into it. So Nadia, yeah, speaking about or the question around bees and if they keep the elephants away. Absolutely, I've personally experienced that at a couple of different lodges, but one very close to us here in the Eastern Cape that I conducted trails on. They tried to protect their scotia trees or the bourbine, the Karoo bourbine. And if you know anything about the Eastern Cape being in the thicket biome, there's not many big trees. So they were trying to protect these few hundred year old bourbines because the elephants love to eat those very sweet flowers. And so they'll push the tree over when it's flowering just to get to those sweeties. But then, obviously, then you lose these ancient trees. So they put up beehives around the trees, and it seemed to stop the elephants. But they found that the magic number was four beehives. If they put three, the elephants still pushed the trees over, but four, they wouldn't go anywhere near it. So obviously, elephants having very thick skin, I don't think that the bees actually can hurt them unless they sting them in the soft areas. If they got into, I don't even think they could sting through their tongue. Maybe their eye. That's probably the only spot that they could get them. Maybe inside the trunk, but even there, I think the skin's too thick. So I think it's more just down to the buzzing noise that they make that irritates them and makes them scared. So it does work. There's also places in Namibia with the desert elephants that they have been farming bees, but with it being so arid, the bees do struggle a little bit to find flowers. So not as easy there. Um, but it has been used and it is being used and implemented and is one of the methods to keep bee elephants at bay for whatever reason, whether it's to protect trees or vegetable gardens or water points, etc. It is quite a good deterrent. But we found that chilies and the planting thereof is even better. So I think the elephants don't like the buzzing noise of the bees, but their sense of smell, I think, is probably their strongest by far. So those nice, what is it, bird's eye chili or reaper chilies around the vegetable patch, the elephants won't go anywhere near it. But now I found a lovely article on The Guardian, which is called Shades of Grey. and how to tell African elephant species apart. And this is going back to Chris Rogue's saying that the Congo elephants are green. Well, from their ears, tusks, and legs to their family lifestyles and habitats, here are the key differences to tell the African elephant species apart. Give me 1 second. So there are now 3 recognized species of elephant: the Asian elephant, the African savanna elephant, and the African forest elephant. All 3 are recognized as threatened with extinction after an important revision to the Red List. This is the IUCN, which is the International Union for Conservation of Nature, compiles a regularly updated assessment of at-risk plants and animals. For many elephant experts and poachers alike, the split into 2 species of African elephant has long been obvious. Researchers proved the difference more than 10 years ago. Now conservation is catching up with the first Red List assessment of them as 2 separate species. They're big and grey, so easy to think that they're very similar, says Dr. Kathleen Gobush, an elephant specialist who led a team of 6 IUCN assessors for the new classifications. But once you spend time with them, a lot of differences are noticeable. So the African forest elephant, mainly found in the Congo Basin in West Africa, and it lives in dense tropical rainforest and is the more threatened of Africa's 2 elephant species. They are voracious fruit eaters, vital ecosystem engineers that help maintain the health of the rainforest. Their scientific name, Loxodonta cyclotis, references their smaller, rounded ears. Their tusks point downwards, occasionally reaching the ground in older males, and their body is higher over the back legs, says Professor Lee White, Minister of Water, Forests, Oceans, Environment and Climatic Change in Gabon, home to the largest remaining population of forest elephants. The mammals live in smaller family groups and have longer gestation periods than their savanna relatives, meaning their populations targeted by illegal hunting are often slow to recover. Their ivory is pinkish and denser, and often referred by poachers who have helped drive the species nearer to extinction. Sorry, preferred, not referred. Obviously for that pink color, I would imagine. So few standalone studies of the forest elephant exist, as they have often been lumped in with the savanna. But a 2013 paper by University of Stirling biologist Dr. Fiona Maisels found that its population is below 10% of its potential size and occupies less than a quarter of its potential range. Genetic analysis indicates that the African forest elephant could have been a separate species for millions of years, and we'll continue this in a moment.
What if you could explore the world from an entirely new perspective? Flying a real drone live without leaving home. This is Nature Eye. Discover our planet's landscapes with a personal guide and a powerful camera. Every flight helps conserve the locations you visit. Book your adventure with Nature Eye.
So just going back to our little talk between African savanna elephant and the forest elephant, the genetic analysis indicates that the African forest elephant could have been a separate species for millions of years. And Dr. Alfred Roker, a population genetics specialist at the University of Illinois, who's published several leading studies on elephant, said the mammoth, the savanna elephant, the forest elephant, and the Asian elephant probably separated at the same time, about 5 to 6 million years ago. During the ice ages, Africa became much drier and the forest retreated. I think each of those species probably had an isolated population. That may account for the high diversity that you had separate populations that eventually came together. And the African savanna elephant, the biggest terrestrial animal on Earth, lives in larger familial groups in grasslands and deserts, roaming huge distances in central, eastern, and southern Africa. They have large ears that are the shape of Africa and allow them to cool their bodies more easily and longer front legs, unlike their forest elephant relatives. Savannah elephants have a big presence. When you're around them, all your attention is there. And even when we're watching them from a remote location as well, they can be very charismatic or comical, a little bit frightening at moments. It's really an amazing feeling. The only other time I felt that would be when I've been around whales, says Gobush. Because savanna elephants are more conspicuous, they're more of a tourist attraction because you can see them and they're not hiding in the dense forest. They dominate the conversation around African elephants. And although the savanna elephant is classified as endangered by the IUCN, meaning it's threatened with extinction, subpopulations are thriving in parts of Africa, most notably the Kavango Zambezi Transfrontier Conservation Area between Angola, Botswana, Namibia, Zambia, and Zimbabwe, and also the Chobe National Park. But experts warn that savanna elephants are likely to be at risk from habitat loss and human wildlife conflict, which is increasingly being borne out in statistics on elephant killings in Africa. African savanna elephants are occupying about 15% of what they used to. So, unless we change our planning, then we'll keep seeing this conflict. And yeah, I've noticed that in the Namib Desert in Damaraland, the population has slowly been increasing, although seemingly now it might even be stagnating. But we've had a bigger population of people coming into those areas, trying to subsistence farm, bringing in livestock. And so they come into conflict with the elephants. And if there's enough conflict with the elephant, they'll be termed a problem animal, and then they issue permits for them to be hunted. So I think that's probably their biggest threat in southern Africa, definitely, because we don't really have a massive problem around ivory poaching. And look at this guy now. He's standing on the log to make himself bigger. That's a good idea, if he can keep his balance, which obviously he can't. That was a good tactic. I've never seen that before, standing on a log, because I think that one at the back is a bit more of a brute. Look at the thickness of his tusks. Not necessarily always the longest tusked will be the dominant. You can just see by the thickness. I think he's a bit older than this more ready elephant in front. And I wonder if they might have a bit of argy-bargy to sort it out. Oh, yeah. This is it. So if you want to sort of see bulls having a go at each other, this red one just had a full go. But he's sort of going from behind the log, almost using it as a bit of cover. So let's see if this holds out. I think this one at the back with the big notch out of its ear, maybe I was wrong. Looks like I was. That little strike maybe turned him off, and now he's backing out. Subordinate behavior is being shown here when they start to reverse, doing the Michael Jackson moonwalk. So I think his little show worked, standing up on top of that log and then striking first. Yeah, that bull, which I thought was bigger, has had enough. He's out of there and he's lost the battle. You see, you don't always have to be the biggest and the strongest. Sometimes you just need to have the better mind. I think that one outthought him by standing up on the log and hitting first. Now he's probably going to try and assert his dominance and keep following him. So there might be quite a bit of reversing going on here. And we've seen that a lot when bulls do have a bit of argy-bargy and a bit of a fight. Now that grayer one, he's going to go hide behind a bush. No, he's being pursued. And they can keep on chasing each other like this for hours and sometimes even days as they keep asserting that dominance.
Africam brings the wild to you. Watch the big 5 at our Waterhole cameras. Indulge your passion for birding with the black eagles on the Black Eagle camera, flamingos at Camphor's Dam, and penguins at Stony Point. Listen to the soothing sounds of Lisbon Falls, or witness animals up close at Cat-Eye Pan. Imagine you're at the hide at Aldonio Lodge, gazing at elephants with the majestic Mount Kilimanjaro as your backdrop. Join us at Africam for an extraordinary wildlife adventure.
So you see what these elephants are doing, and they often try to put cover in front of themselves and to their sort of opponent. And they'll often do that with with you when you're out on bush walk as well, and they've done it with me on numerous occasions, especially younger bulls, or ones that aren't quite sure of themselves. Sometimes even older bulls like this can do it as well. They seem to try and intimidate you, but from behind the bush. So that's the thing. You can also tell then when a elephant really means business or not. If he breaks cover and then comes at you, well, he obviously, really means it. But if he's constantly keeping cover, and really putting on a show and being all intimidating, etc., he's not quite ready to come for you. He just actually wants to get rid of you. So then we generally try to keep the cover as well, not break cover, because then that's also sort of trying to provoke him. Keep that cover and try and disappear off in a direction away from the elephant, slowly but surely, without making any kind of threatening movements. So there, they are back at each other again now, and we might see a little bit more pushing and shoving. That lighter one is definitely bigger. So the smaller one really gained an advantage by standing on that log and striking first. I hope he's able to keep his advantage, because if this other one sort of gains in his mentality, I think he will win. And while we wait and see what happens, I just want to go. I found an article by Reuters, and much to do with the forest elephants of Gabon. They say that Gabon is home to 60 to 70% of all African forest elephants. The farmers held widespread anti elephant protests in 2021. Authorities launching new initiatives to ease human elephant conflict. And in the Pongara National Park of Gabon, forest elephants are smaller than their cousins on the African savanna, but in Gabon, their destructive raids of farmers' fields are having an outsized impact on support for the government and its conservation agenda. With of land, over 10% of its land protected in national parks, Gabon has become the main stronghold in Central Africa for critically endangered forest elephants, whose relative abundance and marauding habits are undermining efforts to protect them there, authorities and scientists warn. And going on, the long standing conflict has become markedly more intense. Sorry, I'll pick up the rest of that now. Give me a second. Looks like there's another one actually joining the fray here. There might be a three-way battle. So the long-standing conflict has become markedly more acute in the past few years. 2021 saw the most widespread anti-elephant protests so far by farmers across Gabon, according to the Environment Ministry. Some people cannot farm anymore. So the elephants are eating so much of their crops, and it has become a political issue and is eroding support for conservation and for the president and the government. Obviously, that's when that support dwindles. Then they normally start taking a different direction. Just outside the capital, Libreville, splintered tree trunks, trampled undergrowth, and churned up earth mark where an elephant strolled through the forest. When they draw close to villages, these natural bulldozers can wipe out carefully tended crops in just a few hours. You can see how people get mad and sometimes kill elephants, says a guide, Jaco Matotsi, as he followed the elephant tracks in the Pongara National Park. Up to 50 elephants are killed per year in revenge or self-defense, while around 10 people have been killed by elephants in the past 2.5 years, according to the Environment Ministry. The raids are causing food prices to rise, spurring rural exodus, and driving up perceptions that the authorities prioritize elephants' interests while doing little to support the around third of Gabonese who live in poverty. And all rural communities harbor this feeling. So much like I've been involved with in Namibia as well, you have this real feeling from the rural villages that elephants are a menace because of these things. They come and they break the water points, they trample their food source, and they can be very destructive to even their buildings, etc. So there has to be some way of making those rural villages and communities benefit from having those elephants there. And that's why what I've spoken about before, the organization called Elephant Human Relations Aid, they run a program where they take um, volunteers out in the first week. They identify a different village each project, and in the first week the volunteers build protective structures around the water points, and they also assist in planting chilies around their vegetable patches. um, and so the elephants can come and drink, but they can't break anything, and they can't destroy any food source, or they're distracted by that. In the second week, the volunteers then go tracking the elephants and checking their movements, and that also assists in helping them gather the data as to which villages are the most likely to be affected by this kind of conflict, and so that they then know which village to go and build their next structures around, according to the movements of the elephants. They've also started what they've called a peace project, which is training the local community members. Obviously, then they need to identify individuals within the community to become guides, and then bring tourists, paying tourists to come and see the desert elephants, and in so doing, then benefiting from the elephants. And once that monetary input comes through, and the tourists start coming with the local guides, they also then start buying curios from the villagers, and spending time with them, etc. So there's a real economic input and a value then placed on the elephants by the villagers themselves. They're the ones that will protect them or get rid of them. So we need to always remember that when villagers do attack and kill wildlife, and there's a big hoo-ha about it, you got to put yourself in their situation. If it affected my livelihood and my children's futures, I would do exactly the same as them. But if there's an alternative and a positive outcome from that alternative, then great. Then we can help them with that, and then we can see further conservation from the community side of these elephant populations. So I think that's what is required in Gabon: some way of protecting first these communities, and then the next step is for them to make an economic positive outcome for them from the presence of the elephants. Without that, I don't see that continuing in any positive way whatsoever, especially if there's no will from the government. It needs to come from, I think, non-government organizations, charities, etc. And then once it starts working, then you start seeing government getting involved, because they always want to be part of something positive, and the perception needs to be as such. If they're going against the people, they're going to be voted out. So it's a tricky situation, but I think that's what needs to be done there. It is working in Namibia, but there's still a lot of work to be done, with the relationship between the NGOs, the communities, as well as government, especially when hunting permits are given out very quickly, and animals labeled as problem animals, when it does seem actually to be a little bit corrupt. But I'm not going to get into that anymore. It is a problem, but there is seemingly a solution with the desert elephants of Namibia that could be applied with the forest elephants in Congo and Gabon. So it looks like potentially our fighting bulls have calmed down a bit. Maybe it's getting a bit too hot for them and they couldn't be bothered. And just alone blue wildebeest.
I started watching WildEarth during COVID. I decided that I wanted to study more, and I saw that Eco Training Pridelands was doing courses, and I decided to do the 8-week online theory course at the end of last year. There's just so much out there to learn and to experience.
Sign up for an Eco Training digital course today with the promo code to receive 200 Rand off.
So, just an article on One Earth, also around the forest elephants, as we see some African elephants now coming in to drink, probably some others, individuals that we haven't seen yet. But they say that recent research shows that the forest elephants may, in fact, provide an enormous service in aiding the fight against climate change by helping to sequester carbon at substantial levels. Enough so that economist Ralph Chammy has valued their greenhouse gas capture services at 150 billion US dollars. And I'll explain why. They have been dubbed the gardeners of the Congo, and these elephants consume mass amounts of vegetation and plant material, stomping on small trees and bushes as they move from location to location. Thanks to the appetite of the elephants, the thinning of the surrounding vegetation gives the trees left standing better access to water and light. This leads to taller and larger late succession trees in the rainforest, which store more carbon per volume in their biomass. Thus, forest elephants act as environmental engineers, increasing the amount of carbon stored by trees through foraging and creating an environment where larger trees can prosper. Once again, being one of those keystone species, and that's an excellent example. So Wally, yeah, we've also used diesel. They don't like the smell of diesel and creosote. And also at some of these villages, what we've done is to keep the elephants out. It's especially once we're still trying to establish the chili plants, is to soak rope in creosote and then just put it up like a fence or just a barrier around the vegetable patch. They won't go anywhere near it. So anything with a sort of strong, pungent smell, the elephants generally don't like. So their sense of smell is probably about 50 times that um, of a bloodhound. It's incredible. So I've spoken a lot about that and gone into a lot of research as well, and spoken how they've actually used them for demining purposes because they can pick up the smell of TNT, and so help with the folks that are going into civil war torn countries like Angola and Mozambique, and elephants are actually helping to show where mines are. Not by sending them in, they actually just use sort of test cases to indicate that they send the likes of drones and things down onto a patch and then bring it back, and the elephants then sort of indicate to them from there if there's any mines in the area. So obviously the details I spoke of on that research paper that I brought forward, but it just goes to show that we can use elephants and their sense of smell for very useful purposes. I think if you had to place an elephant at an airport or at harbors, you would probably find, and if they were trained to pick up drugs or any kind of substance or whatever it might be, you might find a lot more people getting caught. So they say that in India, they've found that elephants don't like lemons. So there's been quite a lot of farmers who have planted lemons around their farms on the edges, and it's kept the elephants out. We do know that elephants love oranges, and so much so that in the Addo Elephant National Park, they actually, when they had the last herd there, it had been shot down right to the tuskless elephant herd. Um, their first warden, he was feeding them with oranges from the citrus farms that are in the surrounding area there. And as a result, they used to chase him in his pickup when he used to arrive with these oranges. And oranges later were banned in the park because if anybody came in with oranges, the elephants would mow them down, push the vehicles over, or break windows or whatever to get to these oranges. And I do also know of a disaster that happened in Savuti in Botswana, where there was a school camping trip. And one of the kids had a bag of oranges in the tent, and elephant came through and squashed the tent to get to these oranges. Obviously, the little kid inside, and killed the child. But then eventually managed to get the tent open and got to the oranges. That's all it was after. So it's important to remember that elephants do have a very strong taste for oranges in particular. But it seems that I didn't know that they detest lemons. So that's also one of the smells that they don't like. And that question posed earlier, that's one of the answers there. So, Jive Bunny, thanks for your comment. Yeah, I'm not scared to be controversial. I don't like to be religious or political, but I do like to approach those difficult subjects because we need to talk about them. If we don't, well, what's the point of having a conversation? We need to approach these subjects and get right into the reason why. So, I like doing that. Take it or leave it. That's just the facts. But what I also like doing is having a balanced approach to things. I like to see it from both sides and trying to chat about a solution, not looking at it from any biased position. I want to just place the facts on the table and talk about the current sort of methods or lines of standing of different conservation ethics or whatever it might be, and then talk of the potential alternatives. Not saying what's right or wrong, and just making or letting people make up their own minds.
Are you in search of a unique, unforgettable adventure in the wild? Imagine living with the animals you see on TV while getting an inside look at how a live safari TV show operates. We're thrilled to offer this experience through our 7, 14 and 28-day EcoCam experiences. To book your spot, visit wildearth.tv/EcoCam. Come and join us for the bush experience of a lifetime.
So we were speaking about all these odors that maybe elephants don't like, etc. And chilies, for me, is probably the strongest one and the easiest to use. And so much so that when I go walking in the bush, regardless of whether I have a rifle or not, my first go-to is always pepper spray, the direct stream. Because you don't want to be, especially if there's any wind about, using the fog, because you most likely immobilize yourself. And my wife's actually done that. I took her on a bushwalk and she tested her bottle of pepper spray out, and she was coughing and spluttering for the next 3 hours. So, direct stream is the one that we use. And I've actually had managed to turn a number of charging elephants without even touching my rifle, just by spraying pepper spray on the ground in a line and backing off from there. The elephant reaches that line, turns around, and trumpets its way off into the bushes. You just saw trees breaking as it was disappearing. So it's not a long lasting. As I say, maximum about 3 hours, might be burning a lot and its eyes would water, but it's nothing permanent. And it's a very good way to deter elephants. So that's what I prefer to use as opposed to a firearm. When I walk in Namibia and Botswana, I've always got my can of pepper spray in my pocket or on my belt. And it's proven to be a very effective tool in turning curious, naughty, aggressive elephants away from the safety of our group. So, yeah, if you do plan on going into the bush a lot, it's quite a helpful tool. So, very shortly, we will also be able to now access all the Africam cameras, and I think we'll be going to Oldonyo in the not too distant future. That's up in East Africa in Kenya. So, we'll leave this spot, but I'm sure we'll be back at some stage. It is still one of the busiest water holes. There's quite a bit of rain around, as you've seen. We're keeping our eyes on all of them, but it's the hot spots that seem to bring the most activity on these kind of days.